As the car is pretty much complete, I thought we'd do a quick tour. Now, I have a working car. What's more to the point, I have a race legal car, I believe. Okay, so I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up and tell you about all the different components I used. Starting with wheels and tyres, Nankan NS2R tyres on 16 by 7J wheels with an offset of 20, so ET20, exactly as specified in the specs for the class, for the 116 trophy class. I think the wheels have come off a 5 series or off of a 3 series, I'm not sure which, but those are the spec. Same at the back, exactly the same. And then we've got the suspension. Actually, let's talk about the underfloor first. So the underfloor, all of the under tray plastic coating or cloaking or whatever they call it has all been refitted, and I think I might have one or two small pieces missing, but pretty much it's all there. The front suspension remains McPherson strut, but with modified top mounts. So these top mounts allow for the adjustment of the camber and in theory caster actually. Although I have to say, to adjust it, you have to drop the mount, make the adjustment, and then rebolt the mount back into place. Not ideal, but that's the way it is. We've got gas shock coilover struts with adjustable platforms to adjust the ride height. And then from a suspension point of view, it's a standard suspension components except for the bottom arm. I can't remember which one it is, but it comes out from the center of the car right out to the hub. That arm is from an M3 to give it more camber, and it's adjusted to have 4 degrees of camber. The springs are stiffer than normal, as you'd expect, and then all of the bushes have been replaced with strong flex poly bushes. Pretty easy to do the front actually, to put in all the strong flex bushes. While we're talking about the front, standard front disc, that's what you have to run. Standard caliper, again, that's a regulation, but with harder pads, or are they softer pads? Anyway, they're carbon Lorraine pads, rather expensive, but crikey, they've got some stopping power, I tell you. So pretty good. We run 30 psi at the track, and the temperature, as the temperature goes up of the tyre, the pressure goes up as you'd expect, and you get about a 6 to 7 psi difference in from cold to hot. So you have to let them down about 6 or 7 psi. At the rear, same deal with the brakes, standard discs, standard calipers, braided hoses, didn't mention that, braided hoses front and back, and again, carbon Lorraine pads on the back. The poly bushing on the back is much more complicated. There are many more bushes to replace, and you also have to press a number of them out with a hydraulic press. Actually, I think you can get them out without the hydraulic press. It's just you can't get the new ones in. So I ended up purchasing a cheap hydraulic press to actually get the bushes into the rear suspension. Took me a very long time. One of the biggest jobs in the build, actually. It was doing the rear suspension, aside from the fact that I sheared a couple of bolts, which you can find out in other videos on my channel. So, of course, there's a roll cage, and the only additional instruments were the oil pressure on the left and water temperature on the right, in just above where the heater controls are, you can see there. And then to the left you've got the extinguisher pull, and to the right you've got the electronic battery isolator, and we'll see the unit and the battery in a second. We also have a data logger. So we have continuous data logging showing lap times and whatnot as we're running. We have a removable steering wheel. Which is on splines. race seats, and 6-point harness. The seat, the harness, and the steering wheel all came from 4040, and they do a package deal, which is quite good. I've also optionally got the adjustable runners on the seat, so I can actually slide the seat backwards and forwards. Those runners came from Sean Gosling. So the cage came from Sean Gosling, the runners came from Sean Gosling. I know there's another type of roll cage you can get now from, I think it's from Custom Cages, which does look quite nice, but I've been quite happy with this one. The only mistake I did make was I didn't have it powder coated before I had it installed in the car, which probably I'm going to end up taking the whole cage out eventually, stripping it all back and having it powder coated. So that was a bit of a mistake, but yeah, all good. Obviously the rest of the interior is stripped out, and you can see we have these door cards fitted. That's a regulation requirement. So if you're going to take out the standard door cards, and I don't think you can run the standard door cards with the roll cage, then you have to put door cards, these lightweight door cards, you have to install those. At the rear of the car, you can see we've got the door card installed. You notice there's no window winder. It's simply wound up, and then I've cut the I've cut the shaft that the handle goes on. Now, this is what most people do apparently. There is the possibility, if I did need to raise it up and down, you can actually work out something to get it to go up and down. But you know, really, it's supposed to be up all the time anyway. In the back, we've got the wiring here for the radio, for a race car radio, analog car to pit radio. And this box here, which is lined with foam, is where the radio sits. You might have noticed on the steering wheel there's a red push to talk button, and then what we do is we put a microphone in the crash helmet, and I've got a standard Bell crash helmet, but it has got a space for a microphone. So Jez Banks installed that for me. Thanks, Jez. And then we just plug that into that socket there. And also there's a sub socket on the helmet for earphones that or earbuds that go in your ears, so you can hear. What else have we got in the back here? We've got fire extinguisher. You saw the safety pull on the dash. There's another one obviously on the front of the car, which we'll see in a second. Tow hooks front and back with the obligatory sticker. I've gone for the wire hooks. You notice that there's this pull here through this grommet. The problem is that when you cut the power to the car with the battery isolator, you can't open the boot. So you can imagine that if you're in an accident on the track, the marshal presses the button to cut the power, and then they need to get the boot open for some reason. There's no way to do it. This is the pull that used to be inside the tailgate, yeah, on the inside panel, and it's a bypass thing, so you can pull that and then you can lift the boot. While we're around the back of the car here, you can see the exhaust. It's got a rear catalytic converter. So the catalytic converter is literally this piece here. It's sort of looks like a fat pipe going back into the car. There is a rear box on the car. I'm also running a centre box on the car. Lots of people don't, but I'm getting 128.5 brake horsepower, so I've not got any concerns about power loss with the centre box. I'm running a Claris exhaust, slightly modified by Anthony Seddon Racing, so that it's got a flex in it to stop the pipe cracking. I've just come around here briefly through this passenger door to show you the camera. So this is the front-facing camera. I will also have a rear-facing camera. I don't have that yet, but I do know, I'm pretty sure I know which one I'm going to get. I want a camera that I can operate remotely from the dash, because one of the things I've noticed at race meetings is just before everybody's due to go down to the assembly area, all the mechanics are racing around trying to fit all the cameras and make sure the SIM cards are fitted, etc., or storage cards. And I want to avoid all of that by using a remote controlled camera. Here you can see the location of the battery and the isolator. So this is the little isolator unit just here, cabled up obviously to the button on the dash, and that quickly cuts the power. There is one thing I might have to do with the cabling, is that the black cable that comes out of the battery, I believe I've got to put some yellow tape around it. I've got the yellow tape, so I'll get that done. That's a minor thing I've got to do. There is one other thing I've got to do actually that I only realised the other day. When we fitted the new steering wheel, it doesn't have a horn push. So at the moment this car doesn't have any way of sounding the horn. So I'm going to have to rig up something for that. Okay, let's talk about the engine. Standard BMW 116 engine, you're not allowed to bore it, you're not allowed to stroke it. It's got everything is standard. The only things that aren't standard are the Clarios exhaust system. The throttle body is a 2-litre throttle body with a 2-litre hose into a 2-litre airbox over there over there. And believe it or not, you run a 1.6-litre MAF in the 2-litre airbox. So those modifications have been done, and the ECU is mapped to match all of this. So the ECU has been mapped to cope with the throttle body, with the exhaust system, and the fact that you don't run the second oxygen sensor because the catalytic converter is moved to right to the back. You can't run, an oxygen sensor in front of the cat and behind the cat. So one of them is done away with, and the mapping in the ECU copes with all of that. The only other modifications I've made to this car, I've fitted an oil cooler. Most people do, but some people in the club don't actually run an oil cooler, or some people in the 116 class. I've also fitted sump baffles. So it's a metal baffle with 2 rubber flaps on it that come out of an M3. That's a recommended modification, but not everybody runs a sump baffle. For example, Anthony Seddon told me he doesn't run sump baffles on his cars. And obviously I had to mount the oil cooler in the front of the car. So the oil cooler is mounted behind the lower grille, actually, underneath the number plate. A couple of other small modifications. We saw earlier that I have an oil pressure and water temperature gauge, and the senders are cabled in here. So there's the oil pressure sender. This is the water temperature sender. A couple of things worth noting. Had to wire in an earth into each of those. They won't naturally earth, and if you haven't got an earth, the senders won't work. So you can see that there's an earth for both of the senders coming off of the oil housing. There's another piece I feel that I should drop into the video at this point. It's the air conditioning delete. So the compressor has been removed, the pipe work. I haven't yet actually removed the evaporator or whatever it's called in the heater unit, but a lot of the air conditioning parts have been removed. Now that does raise the question of the belts to drive the the different ancillaries. And I raised this because actually as I was editing this, I had a message from someone asking about the belt. The standard belt is longer, and it's this one here, and the shorter belt is 1640 millimeters. And I point that out because on one of the car parts sites, and I think it was Euro Parts, It's listed as being 1635, and I did purchase one of 1635, and I can tell you it doesn't fit. No matter how hard you try, you just will not get it to fit. And the make of that belt was a Dayco. So I looked on the Dayco website, and it actually lists the compatible belt on there as being this one, PK1640, which is a 1640mm belt with 6 ribs. And so this is the one that I bought, and this works fine. So just a note, if you're going to do the AC delete, this is the belt you need after you've removed the compressor. As far as transmission is concerned, I'm running a lightweight flywheel, which is a solid flywheel, so it's done away with the dual mass, standard clutch assembly, and standard gearbox. You have to run standard gearbox, but I have Rob at 4040 did install a short shift for me, which is, it seems quite notchy to start with, but actually it's quite nice. It is better than the standard shifter. Out of those things, if you're doing a road car, I wouldn't advise you to do those things. Well, the main thing is don't put in the flywheel, because what you'll find is you get a lot more gearbox chatter, and it's quite noisy on overrun. I thought there was a problem with my car when I first did it, but I then realised that all the cars I've been driving during the season had all got the same problem. And I've noticed that if you watch videos of 116 trophy cars on the track, you can hear the same groaning noise from the transmission. So it seems to be a bit of a common problem if you go down the lightweight solid flywheel route. Fire extinguisher pipes. I've got 4 nozzles, one in each corner of the engine bay. And you'll notice that I've installed brackets. So on every nozzle, I've installed a bracket. The reason for this is because there's a rumour that next season it'll be a requirement for the nozzles to be attached to brackets. I think the theory is that if it's not attached to a bracket, it could flap around and actually the pipes might come apart, because they're only sort of this funny push fit sort of arrangement. Maybe that's why. I'm not quite sure why they're doing that, but certainly I've fitted brackets in the engine bay and in the passenger compartment. We didn't see the nozzles in the passenger compartment. There's one on the passenger side and one on the driver's side. They're both in the footwell, sort of pointing at the sort of seat area, more or less. The reason that I've got one on the passenger side is because I will occasionally be running with a passenger seat, because I want to get some driving instruction when I'm on the track. Probably the last thing to tell you about is the bonnet catch. You can see that the whole catch mechanism has been removed. You can just disable it, but you can't use a standard bonnet catch mechanism. You have to replace it. You can replace it with pins and clips, or you can replace it, as I have, with aero catches. They're not too bad to fit. You'll find a video that I created showing how I fitted them, but they work quite neatly, and they're easy, fairly easy to fit. Final thing. Here you can see the pull for the extinguisher and the push for the cutout, and the stickers which I've put round that way to make it easy for the marshals to read them. That's the theory anyway. I don't think they really needed to be round that way, but anyway, that's what I've done. On the subject of stickers, I've already shown you the toe stickers. I find it a bit weird that you have to point out where the toe hook is. I can't believe that a marshal would not recognise that. The other thing I've done regarding stickers is that I've put markers in for where the jack points are on the car. Now, most mechanics know exactly where they are, but this is just for speed, really. And it's actually been quite useful when I've been working on the car here in the workshop. I don't have to crouch down and find out where the jack point is. I can just slide the jack in, and I know exactly where it is. Okay, so that's a quick tour of my car. I bought the car, I think, in August 2021. I started working on it around October 2021. At least I started to strip the suspension out. And I finished it, let's say, at the beginning of December 2022. So it's taken me about 14 months. Although I have to say that I've run it on the track during September and October. The only thing that would have meant that it wouldn't have been legal for the 116 Trophy Series is because at that point I was still running M Sport bumpers and side skirts. So I suppose if I had have had those already lined up, maybe it's been a 1-year project. I had a full-time job until the end of September this year when I retired. So up until that point, I was doing 2 hours here, 2 hours there. Then I've had more time to spend on it since that time, although by that point I'd pretty much finished the car. In fact, 3 days before I retired, I did my first run on the track in the car at Snetterton. But the time it takes to do it is considerable. I don't have any young kids. My kids are all grown up and left home. I do have grandchildren who I like playing with when they come round. So I've had to spend I've spent some time doing that. All I'd say is don't underestimate the amount of effort to build one of these, particularly as I was looking on Race Car Direct this week, and I think there's 5 of them on there, all around the 11,000 to 14,000 range, which is about what it cost me to build this car. So just bear that in mind.